Hello and welcome back to TGE's Current Read. I am Sam Herbst and my guest today is journalist and author Minna Dubin. Minna's essays and articles on motherhood and identity have been featured across all the best-known outlets, including the New York Times, the Philadelphia Enquirer, LitHub, Mother Magazine, and so much more. Minna is a leading feminist voice on mom rage, and she joins me now to talk about her debut book, Mom Rage: The Everyday Crisis of Modern Motherhood. Minna, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here and talking to you.
Gosh, so I've been a fan for a while, since your 2019 article, in fact. I was so privileged to get a sneak peek of your book. It's all printed out, nicely bound, and as soon as I get hold of that hard copy, I'm gonna re-underline it, reread it, and it's so good. Congratulations on the publication of this book. What must it feel like? What does it feel like?
Thank you. It feels really good. I can't believe it. I mean, it's a very strange experience to work on something alone, right where you see me right now in my bedroom, my tiny little desk in my bedroom for so long. And then to have it be a thing, like, it's so satisfying. You don't get this kind of satisfaction very often as a writer, so I'm really relishing it.
And it's a long time coming. People think, okay, you wrote it during lockdown, so you had those months, but you were working on this material, a fair amount of time before that, right?
Sort of. I wrote that essay in 2019, maybe even in 2018, but it wasn't published till 2019. So, like, the ideas have been swimming for a while, but I didn't get the book deal until 2021. I started working on the proposal for the book in 2020. So I think it's true, actually, that I really started this in the pandemic, even though the idea of mom rage was pre-pandemic.
And that you'd pen down those thoughts and that experience that you mentioned in the book, which was kind of the catalyst.
Yeah.
But you didn't coin the term maternal rage. You gave definition to it for a lot of women who are not familiar with the coinage of it. But who did coin it? Was it Anne Lamott? You mentioned it in the book.
I actually don't know, because it depends what you're going to call it, right? I think I might have. I don't know. I use the term mom rage. She used the term mother rage. Her article in Salon called Mother Rage definitely gave me the confidence to write about it. But there are books, like in my research prior to this, that use the term maternal rage, maternal anger. Like, it's like, what are you going to call it? It depends. I can't say who coined it, but it definitely wasn't me.
So what is it? Let's put a definition out here for listeners who might be new to the concept. I'm guessing if they are mothers, they're not new to the concept. But if we're going to give a definition, let's hear yours. What is mom rage?
Sure. I think of mom rage as the uncontrolled anger that is so common in modern motherhood, and it stems from the impossible expectations that are currently on mothers, combined with a deep lack of support in the societal structures and also in the family systems.
And you're very clear about how inclusive you are, very aware, because was it your undergrad? You majored in was it identity politics? So
basically, yeah.
Yeah, so you very pro, sort of inclusivity and diversity. So, but you do explain why you use the term mom rage as opposed to parent rage or dad rage. You get into it. So I like to kind of not err on the side of caution, but I suppose let's go with that. I don't like to man bash. I don't like it to be because there are a lot of parents, dads including, and their same-sex couples that might struggle with the similar type of rage. So why does mom rage fit better than, say, dad rage or parent rage? Because I have also seen my husband experience a similar type of rage. How does it differ?
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't interview any dads for this book, which was a purposeful decision because I wanted this to be a book that focused on mothers' voices, not fathers' voices. And I do have same-sex couples in this book. I have one couple where one mom has mom rage and the other doesn't, and I have one couple where they both have mom rage. Um, so for me, it felt very important to use the term mom rage and not parent rage or dad rage, because mom rage is specific to misogyny. Like, it is particularly related to gender, around misogyny and patriarchy in the culture, like the way that the culture disempowers and oppresses mothers. It's about gender. Like, even if you are a trans woman or a non-binary person who gave birth, like, you are still experiencing the oppression of mothers that's based on misogyny. So you can't really divorce mom rage from gender. And even though fathers can feel anger and rage, right? Like, gender doesn't discriminate. I mean, rage doesn't discriminate based on gender. Um, the expectations on fathers, like their parenting expectations, are just like this total other bar from the parenting expectations on mothers. So when they yell and they feel like maybe they feel bad about it, the badness, like the shame that they feel is so minimal generally in comparison with mothers. Like, there have been studies that have been done that prove that men and women experience anger episodes with the same frequency, but the shame that women feel after raging is so much bigger than the shame that men feel. Like, even I see it in my own partnership. Like, my husband will feel bad, he'll apologize, but he won't like go down into a shame spiral and question his worth as a father or a person the way that I will. There's like a whole different, and also in our society, we experience men's anger different from women's anger. When a woman is angry, we see it as a character flaw. She's a bitch. She's shrill. She's nasty. When a man is angry, we experience it as situational. So we'll be like, oh, well, it's not really his fault. The people weren't listening. Right, like he's not bad because he raged, but a mother is bad because she raged.
Or
And
in
so
a familial
different.
setting, he's putting his foot down. Dad is
Right,
putting his foot down.
He's being the disciplinarian, which is his quote unquote job. Like, that's what he's supposed to do.
But
So,
what are moms societally supposed to be?
oh, moms are supposed to be nurturing and, mythically gentle and patient and, having no needs, always putting the family's needs first. And which is, all of these are impossible for someone to do. It's not human that someone's going to be like that all the time. And so she's bound to break out of this box of perfection every single day. And then she's bound to feel bad about it.
So you make a very clear distinction early on in Mom Rage about physical violence and abuse and the difference between Mom Rage. So that makes sense to me, and you are very clear about the fact that you haven't, your violence is you, and like me, I throw things. Whatever's close to me, I throw, or I shout, I scream. And you have a very sort of emotive moment in the book where you hit your hand against your palm, or you slap on the table, as so very similar reactions, but not physically abusive. But there are such parallels in how that can kind of build, and I think that's the fear. So yes, the two are different, but how would you say, do you think that is what kind of leads to the shame that there's this potential in us to let it get that bad?
Totally. I mean, I think I don't remember the exact line in the prologue, but I think I say that, like, the potential for harm, like the potential that mom rage holds for causing harm, every mother knows that. And that is the big piece of where our shame comes in, because we're like, oh my God, am I going to ruin my children? And I think that every mother feels that even if they don't have mom rage, right? Like we're all afraid we're going to destroy our children. Like that is what comes with parenthood. Whether it's from our laziness or our OCD tendencies, like whatever it is, we're afraid we're going to ruin our children, right? Like that's like part of parenting, I think. And I think that, never in this book am I trying to say we should all like be yelling and screaming. Like I'm never trying to say that mom rage is a good thing. I'm just trying to normalize it because I think it's super common and I think it's a result of mothers being treated poorly. And that, I basically say in the prologue, like anything can become abuse or can become harmful, right? Like if you do it too much, like running can become harmful, eating can become harmful. Like everything, if you cross the line, can go into bad territory. And, I think slamming my hand against the countertop, if I'm doing it every day, every time I talk to my children, yes, I think that harm is waiting for me and for them. But I also think that if the majority of our interactions with our children are positive and loving and nurturing, and, once in a blue moon, we are throwing something that we're not like, I just think there's it's nuanced, but I think there is a very big difference between that and abuse.
So I wanted to pick your brain on something because
yeah,
I get the feeling that we have a lot of similarities in the way we deal with our kids. I have two boys, age almost 7, and the other one's just turned 3. But especially my 7-year-old, when I'm really at my wit's end, often he says to me, "Mom, I know that we're having trouble now, but I know you still love me." Or because I say to him, no matter what, no matter how angry I get, I know you still love me, because I've become very used to apologizing to him and letting him know that I'm still human and I get overwhelmed. And so we teach each other in that way and guide each other. We even went on a breath work course to kind of, when we're feeling overwhelmed, this is what we do. But I thought to myself the other day, and I really wanted to hear your thoughts on it. If I'm apologizing a lot, because we're reaching boiling point here. In South Africa, we're reaching like year end. So we don't have like a Christmas break, that we break for the year, and our new school year starts in January. So everything kind of feels like it's reaching this critical pressure point towards December, when schools close, businesses close, and we have a bit of a break, if you can call it that. And it's reaching that point now for us. And so my mom rage incident, my anxiety, everything is feeling really hard right now. And I'm apologizing a lot. And my thought was, am I teaching my child that when you can abuse, like emotionally abuse someone you love all the time as long as you apologize? Then are we leaning into like gaslighting territory when he has a partner one day or when he has kids? What would you say about that? Because that's how I'm attacking myself, I suppose. Like it's fine if you apologize, Sam, but actually it's not, because you keep doing it and it's not letting up, and you're turning your child into someone who thinks it's okay to fuck up all the time and then apologize for it later.
I like really feel how I feel your concern and like and how bad you feel. I am totally feeling for you right now. I think that apology is incredibly important, and I think that apology is bigger than just saying I'm sorry. I don't think that you're saying it's okay if I fuck up over and over and over and over and over, as long as I say I'm sorry. Like you can hurt people. I think that part of apology is also saying I shouldn't do what I did, and that it's not okay. Like that's part of it, is not saying it's okay I yelled because I'm sorry. It's saying it's not okay that I yelled. Like, like that. Because I think rage yelling is also a little bit, a little different.
Yeah.
I think it's saying it's not okay, and that, you don't deserve that. And I'm here and talking about like, you know, what you were doing, like talking about breath work and like, you know, that repair and the different kinds of like things we can do, and like even strategizing, like at age 7, I feel like you can actually start to be like, to like come up with plans together, like not like it's your son's responsibility
Mm,
for your rage, but like just to like make it more of an open conversation about like, this is what I'm working on this week. Like I feel like you can have a conversation around it in terms of like, this is what I'm going to try and do when I feel overwhelmed this week. Like, let's see if it'll work. Like, if you bring them into it, it brings you such a mindfulness because, like, they're watching,
mm,
you know? Like, I don't know. I think that the bigger conversation with them is super important. And you're also showing your kid, like, that you're not perfect and that you're trying and you're going to try this thing. And then the next time you're going to try this thing, like, that you're not giving up and you're not just saying, I'm going to do bad and I'm going to leave it like that.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, just the other day as well, he also said, I, I'm not even sure of what the issue was, but I had shouted and I just said, I just need 5 minutes. And then it escalated again. I didn't get those 5 minutes. I hadn't properly repaired. I hadn't properly regulated. And he he said, Sam, I think he calls me Sam. Sam, I think
Mhm.
we need to go outside. Let's just go outside and take a few deep breaths. Then he starts, and I do have a little bit of that. The guilt just keeps coming. Where I do have a little bit of that. He's becoming responsible for me. But I think also, at the risk of this becoming a therapy session between me and you, but
Yeah, yeah.
I think that it's that awareness. Okay, he's feeling responsible. Let me regroup. Let me see my therapist. I said to my husband last night, it's time again. I need to
Yeah.
schedule. So I think it's that constant awareness. And that old saying, and I think we say it to all of our girlfriends, if you worried about being a good mom, you probably are already a good
Right.
mom. Yeah.
Right. And also like he's actually not in charge of you, and he is modeling back to you what
Mm,
you taught him
mm,
about self-regulation. Like he's going to use that. My son uses that now, and now for himself, he'll be like, we have to stop and I need a break. Like when he's upset,
mm,
and he'll say that to me, like, you're also teaching him how to take care of himself.
mm,
And you don't have to do it perfectly for him to learn.
mm. So your son was also the catalyst for you. I think our eldest hold that for us. Um, where I mean, if if you describe yourself, and I can't remember where it was, or whether it's in the book or whether it was in an interview that I listened to, as edgy, and I could so relate to it. Where you might have been edgy or had a bit of a bite to you beforehand, but when your kid
Mhm.
comes and you're sitting with lack of sleep and you're sitting with a lack of control because you can't control other humans, um, that's when the rage sets in. And for me, the pandemic really brought out the dragon in me. And in a few
Mhm.
a few other moms. I gave birth to my second child in the pandemic. So I had a toddler and I had this newborn baby. And that's really when the rage properly set in for me. So your son was the catalyst for you. And you mentioned it earlier in the book. So tell me about that process where you eventually realized you had to look yourself in the eye and think, or your husband also said to you at one point, you need to sort this out. So what was that? What happened that set you on this path to thinking about mom rage in this way?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it was both my husband and my son. I don't think I can put this on my son. I think that my husband makes me equally frustrated and angry. And I think a lot of that is co-parenting. I just think like co-parenting has been incredibly difficult for us, and that came as quite a surprise because we're so similar, and I think we like agree in general on most things. And so the fact that like we struggle in co-parenting just seemed very surprising. I mean, my rage really came. on when I started weaning my son when he was about 9 months. And so like in that period from 9 months to a year plus when I was weaning, that's when I feel like I started to feel ragey. And also my periods came back for the first time since giving birth then. And so my cycle just like I had PMS like I had never experienced. And like for 2 weeks of every month, basically, I felt like I could like tear the house down. And so
Mm.
I started seeing a therapist during that period. And I'd seen therapists on and off like in my life, but I wasn't seeing one currently. And I started seeing one then. And I feel like on and off since then, I have been seeing a therapist ever since. Like that was the beginning of therapy for real for me. And I have been in therapy forever. Yeah, my husband said to me, you need to get help, basically. You need to deal with this because I was constantly furious at both of them, but particularly at him, I think, at that point. Um, yeah, so that was the beginning of the journey.
So you talk about hormones, and in a lot of my writing, well, you didn't specifically mention, you are mentioning hormones. We're going in that territory. So your
Yeah,
postpartum PMS, and a lot of that, I think, if people were to oversimplify it, you'd be like, okay, she's postpartum, hormones are raging, periods all over the place, and they lean a lot of the kind of blame on that. Women. My husband calls it a fatal flaw, like a biological flaw. He's joking when he says it, but it's like, okay, it's that time now and I'm going to rage. But then coupled with that is a miseducation around, you mentioned weaning. I don't know very many women, and that's why as a writer and a journalist, I seek to educate a lot of women about, hey, do you know what happens when you stop breastfeeding? Nobody knows
mm-hmm.
about it.
Nope.
Everybody knows
Nobody,
that you get irritated just before your period, but nobody knows the havoc that happens around everything else, So education around that. It's not just the fact that you are hormonal, but then as well, it's the I'm searching for it now. Perinatal care, proper perinatal care. Like what happens to a woman during this time? And it was actually, I put it under, what needs to change. But I suppose this is also the catalyst for what contributes to this rage in women. Proper perinatal, lack of perinatal care. So leading up to your labor, and then you speak about that 6-week checkup with your OBGYN, your gynecologist.
yeah,
It's so universal, or at least it is with, in South Africa. Same thing here. The village everybody talks about, that doesn't exist because everybody has their own shit that they're dealing with. Equitable
yeah,
division of labor, which doesn't exist because your husband is paid better because of the wage gap and because he's a man. So he's the primary breadwinner, which makes you the default partner. So that fair pay, contributes to everything. You know exactly what I'm talking about. There's so many parallels
totally,
here. A
totally.
lack of affordable subsidized healthcare, shift in perspective for like work. Mothers who take a leave of absence from work are not on holiday. They haven't fallen behind in terms of their skill set. They're actually adding to their skill set. But people don't see it that way. People see you as just
Right.
like oh, what a pity. She was so great at her job and now she's a mom. Motherhood is so political and all of that adds. It's not just hormones. Everything just adds to the rage. What am I missing, Minna?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's the thing is about like that we get into dangerous territory when we talk about hormones because then people start to think about mom rage as like as a postpartum thing.
Yes.
And I mean, okay, so when does postpartum end, right? Because if you look at the medical community, you're done at 6 weeks, right? Your postpartum period is over. There's no more support for you. No one's checking up on you. Like you're done. You go off and you're a mother now. And no one talks to you about weaning. They just talk to you
Mm.
about feeding the baby, but they don't talk to you about what will happen when you wean, 9 months later or whatever. And, I talk about this like we can't really say that mom rage is postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety because your kid is now like 4 or 6, right? Like how long are we postpartum for? Like there's no education, there's no studying around it, there's no support, like we're just left on our own, and there's as all those things that you mentioned are so infuriating, and we're just like on our own to deal with all of it.
Yeah. And it's not, I've been saying, because similar to you, you also mentioned getting messages every now and then, and it's the odd, you'll get dozens of emails of women saying thank you for speaking out about this topic that is actually taboo and shouldn't be. And I relate, and thanks for giving definition to something that I've been struggling with. But every now and then I get a DM that creeps in that says, I'm really sorry that you dislike your children so much and that you're having such a hard time with motherhood. I wish better for you. And they're being so kind in their, you know, crass way of approaching me about a life that they know nothing about. And I want to say this actually has not much to do with my kids or their behavior.
Right. Totally. It has nothing to do with the kids for the most part. It's
Yeah.
all about like the circumstances. And, I just feel like every time a mother speaks out about something negative about motherhood or something hard or a struggle and steps out of the tiny box of gentle, nurturing, blissed out, blessed, quote unquote, you're going to get punished. That email is a punishment, right? That is one of the ways that our society punishes mothers for talking quote unquote bad about motherhood. And I get those emails too, right? And they're not always as nice as that one.
Yeah, you're so villainized for just speaking out. And I've even had some people go, is Ray's my husband. Is he really that bad? And I'm like, I'm not talking about him at all. He's a great partner and I love him. And we have discussions around, this topic all the time. But we are both victims of a system. And so that, this is about systemic change. And that's what we're working towards. So,
Right.
what is that systemic change? What does it look like in an ideal world?
I mean, you're really right when you say that we're both victims of it, because so much, and I mean, the mother is particularly, I think, disempowered by becoming a parent, but that's because we see mothers as the primary parent, the primary caregiver. But families in general are unsupported. And because mothers are the manager of the family, it falls so much on the mother. But like really the entire family is disempowered. I'm going to answer this question, but I was just thinking about at one of the events that I had a room full of mothers and one father show up. And, there's this white guy sitting in the back of the room, and I'm just like, oh God, this is going to be bad. Like he is going to have to say something bad. And he does raise his hand, of course. And he tells the story of him and his wife. He was from another country and they had green card issues. And so he had to quit his job and become the primary caregiver for the child. And he like was almost in tears, and he was so overwhelmed and just feeling like he also is experiencing this rage. And I think he wanted validation for his challenge. And it just was a reminder that like we are all parents are victims of the disempowerment of families, really, and the neglect. And so when you talk about systemic change, it's really about like honoring and taking care of families, which I think that most societies are not doing, particularly in America. Like when we look at like certain countries that pay like $14,000 a year per child in like in education, and America pays $500 per child per year, like because there's no universal child care. And so that's one of the big systemic changes we need. We need better maternal health care. We need better access to mental health care. In America, it is so difficult to get mental health care. We need paid family leave. I don't know what it's like in South Africa, but we have nothing.
No paid family leave. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And for both parents, right? Because even like the way that we have it, it's through the job. So like some jobs offer it and some jobs don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
And because of what you mentioned, because of the gender wage gap, if there's a father and if the father's job offers it, it's not always at 100% pay, right? And so and also the corporate world like doesn't they don't make it like feel like you can actually take your full leave for men. And so this tiny percentage of men actually take more than two weeks of paternity leave. And so then that system pushes the mother into being the primary parent because her husband can't take off, right?
Yeah.
Like she has no choice. Like the whole system is set up for the mother to be the primary parent and for there to be no support for her.
So I know you spoke to, I don't want to talk too much on this because I actually want to talk about the House of Mom Rage. But
Okay.
on that note, right, I know you spoke to Joe Piazza recently on her podcast, and she talks about trad wives. And I was talking to my husband about it, and I said, like, I feel like the pendulum has just swung, that we've been fighting so hard, and now we're just like, I'm tired. And I've seen it. There's a few influencers in South Africa that have also just gone, hashtag blessed, baby. My husband is the breadwinner and they do not have any control of their own finances. They've just relented. And I was telling my husband I will never be that person, but I can understand it. I know there's so much more to trad wives, but don't you think it's because of that fight that we've become so tired of, that we're just like, I'm a monster for fighting this fight all the goddamn time. So I'm just gonna lean into where the system is pushing me.
Yes, it is. The tracks have been laid for us to just be mothers. That is the easier path. And if we can ignore, if we can blot out the rest of our complex selves and just be mother and not want to be anything else, like, what a blissful life. Like I get their blissed outness, but I don't have the capability to block out the rest of myself. I won't do it. I will not. And I think that those trad wives, like I think the relationship, there is like a direct correlation between the overturning of Roe v. Wade and us not having abortion rights to trad wives. It is all the same wave of we should just be reproduction machines who caregive all day long. Like that's all we're supposed to be. It's related. It's the same thing to me.
So I think for someone who is not getting the nuance and who wants sort of a black and white, this is or this isn't, they won't understand in Mom Rage how or why you bring in your queerness into the book. But you do,
right.
And I'm assuming that you were very intentional about it, despite the risk, the obvious risk of bringing something so personal in. So talk a little bit about that, because I am not queer. I'm, white bread, heteronormative, as like vanilla as they come. And I just love that you went for that, because you're already taking a risk talking about Mom Rage, and now you're taking another risk bringing something so personal about yourself into it. Why that decision? And if you could, expand on that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already writing a book that is super personal and incredibly revealing, like in an almost dangerous way. So saying that I was queer felt like the least dangerous thing that I did in this book. But it felt important to name it because, like I was just talking about, like you can be a trad wife if you're going to cut off like the rest of your complex self. And so in the chapter where I talked about being queer, it was about the way that the society funnels mothers into being just this flattened, just mother self, right? And so about 2 years into motherhood, I was working very hard to try and like claw myself out of what felt like this like cave of just mother. And I was like, okay, who am I? Like what? Because I'm feeling very unfulfilled. I'm feeling like I'm going to like tear down the walls. Like what are the other parts of me? Because I'm not getting any needs met clearly. And so part of that, like returning to my complex, interesting self was doing a second coming out process, because I had already come out when I was right before I got married. But when you're married to a man and you're both cis, like I look like a woman and he looks like a man. And everyone sees you as straight. And so I sort of went right back into the closet in a way once I got married. And then you have a baby and you're like a mom, and like no one, like we just felt like a very straight family in our presentation. And so yeah, part of my reclaiming my needs and reclaiming myself that wasn't just mother was about reclaiming my queerness. And that, because that felt like an important part of who I am. And it was a way to get out of the just mother hole that I felt like I was in. And so that's why I name it, because it was one of the things. The other thing was writing. I wasn't writing, right? And so like that felt incredibly important. That was a big part of who I was. And so like those were the two things that I sort of like clawed myself back to so that I could like fulfill myself in some other way besides just taking care of my kid.
I love it, and I relate so much, you know, like I say, I am pretty vanilla, but for me, after my first child, I started a podcast. I needed that
Yeah.
what's me? What do I need? Where am I? And I gathered my co-hosts and we did the damn thing, you know? And then after my second, and then it was the pandemic, I had spoken to my therapist. I just said, it's not that I was bored. I had my hands full with a toddler and a child, and I just said, I want to write again, and I need to do something. And so I started writing again, and started with my podcast again. And a year later, I went back to university. And my mother-in-law looked at me and said, "Are you fucking crazy? You have two small children." And I thought, this is how I stay alive. And it's been so tough, and when it is tough and when I am feeling the pressure, I remind myself, hey, that's you. And even if you fail, which I'm not, you know, because it's what makes me stay alive. So I think I take heart from what you wrote about in your second coming out. It feels the same to me. I went back to study with 22-year-olds just to feel a part of me again. Not to go back to my 20-year-old self, you know, God forbid.
No, you can never go back.
No, but to just be me again, and to think creatively, because motherhood, the day-to-day mundaneness of motherhood does not feel very creative. So I relate so much to that.
It is absolutely, the day-to-day mundaneness of motherhood is soul crushing. Yeah. And I think that it is exactly that. It is about surviving. Like it is what you going back to school was what you need to do in order to survive. And it doesn't have to be about queerness. Like it's whatever anyone needs. That was just like my personal example was writing and queerness, but like everyone has their own, whatever they need to do in order to survive, to not get lost. You can get so lost. I think those trad wives are lost.
I would agree. And I you know, my challenge is also to really channel whenever a new, you know, I come across a new mom or someone I know has had a baby, I'm always just very honest, and I can feel that they're a little bit put off, you know, and I just say, when you start feeling a certain way, know that it's normal, and know that here's my number, and it's okay if you love it, but it's also okay if you get to a point where you don't, and then, you know, hit me up, or here's a link to my podcast. Not to self-promote, but just we're here. There's others like us. There's a network, you know?
Yes.
So throughout the book, you talk about the House of Mom Rage, but it's the title of your first chapter. So what is this house? Because I thought that it was a really clever analogy and metaphor that you used. And then that leads on to kind of the PR team that you mentioned, the PR of womanhood. So what is the House of Mom Rage?
The House of Mom Rage is this metaphor I use for the structure of Mom Rage, because on the surface, Mom Rage just looks like a mother with an anger problem who is losing her mind over her child spilling a bowl of Cheerios, right? Like it looks like the blame is clearly on the mother for yelling over something inconsequential. And so I use the house metaphor. That that superficial lens of what mom rage looks like. I call it kitchen mom rage. It's like, it's what's happening in the kitchen. It's the daily work. It's just like, it's simple. But in order to actually understand mom rage, we have to go downstairs into the basement. Obviously, this is a metaphor because I live in a single, like, tiny house with no basement or upstairs. And in the basement is all of the societal stuff. It's all the stuff that's happening that we can't see. So down there is all of our identity issues that give or take away power from us. So gender, obviously gender, sexuality, race, class, maybe religion, age, and then also our past trauma. It's all the ways it's the ways we grew up. It's like the lessons that we've learned. It's all of the ways that society has a role here. Like the fact that we haven't been at work for a year and a half, even though we said we were only going to take 4 months off, or the fact that we like wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but every day, like when our husband leaves, we feel sad, or like, it's like, it's all of the deeper stuff. It's that we can't afford childcare because it is astronomically expensive. And grandma, who is the only childcare that we have, because you never get to stop mothering, even when you become a grandmother. It was supposed to come over, but she like got sick. And so you like can't do what you were going to do that day. It's like, it's everything that you don't see and the ways that like all of the work and labor of motherhood falls on moms, or all of the work and labor of childcare, I should say, falls on moms.
So there's one thing as well, and I don't know whether this comes into the basement, but I forgot to mention it because I mentioned a lot of the things like hormones and stuff. You mentioned identity and who the mom is and all of these other things that aren't in the kitchen, that are in the basement. And for me today, you're going to laugh, I think, because it was as simple. I had a rage incident. It's later. I'm recording at 5 p.m. in South Africa, and it's early in the morning for you. You haven't yet had opportunity to, be ground down to nothing.
It's true. I have not.
I've had a day, and my poor 7-year-old, I had a moment of apology, almost 7-year-old. I had a moment of apology with him already. He did not eat his lunch that he was given. And so when I picked him up, he was hungry. And I had been working because I have that small window in the morning before I pick him up from school. And that's the time that I have to fit in all of my work, full-time studies and normal corporate copywriting and journalism work. That's the small window. And so very often I don't eat, and my son and I, when we don't eat. So that's a basic unmet need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we talk about that contribution, a lot of it is your basic needs aren't being met. And that's also why early motherhood becomes a catalyst, because you're not eating properly, you're not exercising, you're not sleeping, crucially. So I mentioned all of those the systemic issues, the societal issues, and then also hormones, but also unmet needs. So do unmet basic needs also fall into the basement? Or is that like...
Oh, totally. I think so. Yeah. It's all of the ways that, but it's about, why are your needs unmet? Because no one is taking care of you, and you have so much to do that's on you that you aren't able to take care of yourself. Like it still goes back to like systemic and familial structures not set up to take care of the mother.
Who holds the mom? Who holds the mom?
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. So it still goes back to those same boxes. Like all these things are in there, including unmet needs. Unmet needs are a symptom. They're a result.
So I'm sure like me, like you also get a lot of posts that find you on social media because of maybe what we write about, and that's about a woman's inner child. I actually saved one yesterday and sent it for the purpose of this discussion. That rage bubbles up when you feel unheard, when you're left without a voice, and essentially when your inner child, your girl child, flits to the surface, triggered by something. And that's normally your children. When you feel that loss of control, or you feel like you're not heard. And I think a lot of girl children, boy children as well, men, that grow into men, I think a lot of us feel like nobody's listening, but maybe women, especially because of the patriarchy. And as you say, moms who are rage are in pain, even if we don't know it. Do you think it's helpful or harmful, those social media posts, this like social media psychology that we're seeing lately? Because obviously we live our lives very publicly as parents. So we're seeing perfect parenting happening. And a lot of
Right.
those lies, and we have to consistently remind ourselves that those are other people's highlights reels, or that that's not the real reality of, what we face day
Yeah.
to day as mothers. And then you have this other wave of, you know, short post psychology. So I don't know. I wanted to pick your brain on that. How do you feel about that?
I feel like a little bit I feel a little muzzled around it because like they're also my internet community, these people. Like
I hear you. I hear you. I think it can be both. I think it kind
yeah,
of shines
yeah.
a spotlight, but at the
I
same,
think I think it's mixed. Okay.
yeah,
I think that anything that talks about your pain or your rage is deeper than the kitchen. Like when they say your inner child, they are asking you they are reminding you that there's something deeper going on, which I think is important. I think anywhere that you can get that message is good.
mm,
But one of the problems with that message is that it still puts the onus on you, right? It's still like, this is about your inner child, when it's like, this is about the society disinvesting from mothers and families and children. Like
yeah,
I worry a little bit about the like, you can fix this if you take my workshop. I'm like,
yes.
no, 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 we actually need something much bigger than a workshop.
Or
Like we need a society like restructuring.
in addition to the laundry list of stuff that you have to do in a day, also you need
Yeah.
to work on yourself, journal, find a therapist, go see the therapist consistently and work on yourself, because you're the one who's fucked up. And it's like, sure, I am, but also can we change the system a little here?
Right, right, right. It's a fine line to walk because
Yeah,
I actually do think that therapy is great. And like, I think it should be free and I think we should all be
true.
in
Yeah.
therapy. Like, I totally am not anti-therapy. Like, I'm for it. And I think that I don't think about it as the inner child. I write about it in the book as like trying to find your rage triggers. And sometimes those rage triggers are from childhood, but they
Yeah.
could be from adulthood. So, like, there is validity to the work, but sometimes the way that it's Instagram and Instagram is flawed and it makes it very simple. And I also I'm very allergic to anything that makes mothers do more labor.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so this speaks to that. You write about systemic change in the book, and you write about uh, the motherhood's PR team.
Mhm.
And one of your early chapters is that motherhood is touted as the best job a woman can have, and you also speak about the scam of motherhood. Charlene and I talk about it on the Great Equalizer all the time.
Mm.
Um, so talk about that PR team, because I have flagged a an extract for you to read that I'd love to hear from you. We'd be privileged to hear you read that passage out loud. But I think we need to just plug listeners into that PR, what you're talking about when you talk about motherhood's PR team.
Yeah. So I use the idea of the PR team to, again, a metaphor like the House of Mom Rage, to try and or like put a name to this amorphous thing that we can't see. And because it's very hard um to direct the causes of mom rage because they're invisible.
Mm,
And so I try to give it a name, this invisible force. And so the PR team is basically the mainstream culture, and the messages of motherhood's PR team are that motherhood is the best job you can ever have. If you don't, they scare us. If you don't have children, you'll regret it. Um, that that motherhood will give you purpose and identity. and that it's the best thing that ever happened to us. And we get these messages from books and movies, from celebrities and magazines. We get it from our friends, from our own mothers. When you walk into, a store and someone says, and they see you with your baby and you're like so tired and your like nipples hurt and you're like, still bleeding. And they're like, isn't it the best?
You only have 18 summers. You only have 18 summers. Don't forget.
Yeah,
it goes so
like
quick.
Totally. Every message is just about that motherhood is the best and that you should be enjoying this. And so, that's the PR team, basically.
So that's the PR team. Read from Mom Rage, your book, your debut book, from page 54 about how women are raised.
Okay. Women are raised to be detail-oriented and good at time management, coordination, and communication. Essentially, all the bits and pieces that must get taken care of. It's not the glory work, it's the grunt work that keeps the world turning. This continues right into motherhood. After the birth of a child, mothers are expected to be the parent who holds all the details: what the child eats, how much, what must be in the bag for daycare, what time the naps are, the babysitter's phone numbers. Mothers' own needs and details fall to the wayside as they struggle to stay on top of every single thing in their families' lives. This additional workload of overseeing all the details as the household manager and leading expert on their own children has proven to directly decrease mothers' well-being. The PR team is eerily silent about the darker aspects of motherhood. They don't mention that our mental wellness is exponentially more likely to plummet and can remain that way for years, even decades, or that refusing the role of primary parent and household manager is nearly impossible to do without feeling and being perceived as willfully neglectful. Whereas when fathers put their jobs first, the waters part for these good men. Or that the relentless workload of motherhood that keeps us constantly on the move, even when our bodies are still, edges us ever closer to rage. Or that even though rage is a natural reaction to being systemically stripped of one's power, mothers can't actually claim that any of this is happening to us because we seemingly each made the choice to shrink our own lives. This keeps not only the PR team silent, but us too, because who exactly can we blame besides ourselves? The PR team? What even is that? How can I get in touch with them? Without public warning or even a whisper network, each mother is left to figure it out herself. What we figure out is that motherhood is not the story we've been fed. We have been duped. The scam of motherhood becomes evident the minute our own needs show up. From maternal health care to child care to elder care, the failures of society's systems to take care of mothers persist for the rest of our lives. But we better keep our rage to ourselves, because motherhood is the best job a woman can have.
So good. So good. So I have a couple of more questions, but I do just want to plug that listening to you read that out loud reminded me that this is an audiobook as well. And I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan as a mom of audiobooks because we do a lot of driving. Can I tell you something hilarious? It was my 3-year-old's birthday this week, and we got him, he's very into Peppa Pig for all our sins at this point, and we got him a little Peppa Pig town that has Mommy Pig's car and Peppa drives around in. Mommy Pig cannot be removed from the car. All the other figures, Daddy Pig, George, and Peppa, can be removed, but Mommy Pig cannot be removed from the car. So for all the Mommy Pigs out there, this is on audio. Get it done.
That's right. That's right. And I narrate it. So while you are a chauffeur for the rest of your life, you can listen to me narrate Mom Rage.
Exactly. Exactly. If you want more of that, do that, but also get hold of this book. Um, I do want to ask you a couple of more questions, but
Sure.
also not as a shameless plug, really
Yeah.
not. But I wanted to share something with you because throughout reading your book, I just kept thinking about this piece that I wrote in 2021. In 2021, I wrote a series of articles called "The Dark Side of Motherhood," and about all these things that we don't talk about. And so, how
Mhm.
nice and fortuitous that there is this whisper network of us
Mhm.
moms who talk about these things that villainize us in society, and we don't give a fuck, you know. So I'd love to share the opening of this with you, um,
Okay.
because it leads me into the support network, right? And into people just
Mhm.
changing their outlook on it. So it's called The Dark Side of Motherhood, Mom Rage. We're heading into dangerous territory. Um, I was overwhelmed and felt like I might vomit, or worse, if I didn't get away. I left my baby in his cot, told my toddler to wait in the room, closed the door, ran to the kitchen, and screamed. Anger followed the overwhelm, and I launched at my dustbin, which is in my trash can, half my size but big enough to destroy with satisfaction. I kicked and kicked and kicked. The bin had been a Christmas treat for the household. I'd spent a couple of grand out of my first and only UIF payments on a shiny new name brand dustbin, and 9 months later, it was collateral damage. A safe outlet because, were it not for my Brabantia bin taking the hit, it might have been one of my kids. The memory is still so fresh, so raw, so vulnerable, so shameful. And while I could put a comedic spin on it, I won't, because the desperation a mother feels in moments of maternal rage is heartbreaking and decidedly unfunny. So I wrote
Oh
that.
God, that just give me chills up and down. I love that you say, well, I could put a comedic spin on it. I won't. I love that.
Be-
Because in media, I feel like whenever there is anything about like in TV shows or movies or something about a mother getting mad, it's funny.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's dangerous. And I think as moms, when we talk about it with one another, we also do put that, oh my God, I lost my shit at my kids the other day. I did this crazy thing, you know, or I threw this, or at one point, there was one point in my motherhood journey that I bit my cell phone and it cracked the camera. And I
Oh my
fucked up my
God.
phone royally because then I went and took it to a cheap place to get the camera repaired, and they replaced the screen. And it was just this, and I just kept like shaming myself. Well, you did it. You did this to yourself, you know? And it
Yeah.
was like when we start to talk about those shameful moments, they do become decidedly unfunny. And I think we need to
Mhm.
stop joking about it and laughing, you know, because
Yeah.
early motherhood, especially, and not all motherhood, sure, but I think early motherhood is tricky. And you do have those moments, and I think we need to hold each other more rather than laugh about it. It's not funny. It's not a funny
Yeah.
situation. So what if someone is listening to this and they're a parent supporter rather than a parent or a mom themselves? What can they do? Because you do bring it up in the later chapters in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things you can do. I mean, one is take care of your people's children, like offer to babysit, offer to be, the Sunday night babysitter, get to know those children. Like, I think one of the things is in our society with the nuclear family is that we don't let anyone in to the family. Like it's just
Yeah.
the parents, maybe the grandparents. Like we don't have other people who are like woven into our family's lives, good friends even, so that like it's actually challenging to have someone else come in because then you have to teach them how to do the things and it's like actually more labor sometimes. But I think that, and we also don't think that anyone wants to take care of our children because we're
Yeah,
like, this is
exactly.
hard.
Yeah, why would you want to? Thank you so much. Like, how many thank yous can you give up? Should we get them flowers and dinner when they come and watch our kids? What should we do for
Right.
them? Yeah.
Right. But like it's so much easier to watch someone else's
Mm,
kids, because they don't have the same emotional triggering around the children. Like it's anyway. So one thing I would say is take care of other people's children, bring people food.
Yes.
Bring families meals so that they don't have to, and make sure that they have like something really simple to eat for the kids who aren't going to eat like the sauce on the lasagna or whatever. And then, I mean, also, I think just being a listening ear, like I think that moms in particular need people that they can talk real about motherhood to, even to send that like shameful text. Like I feel so many times after you rage and you go into this shame spiral feeling, you can't even give yourself the compassion that you should be able to reach out to a friend and say the shameful thing that you're feeling. Like, I just did this terrible thing. I feel horrible. But sending that text is actually incredibly important because it means that you think that you are worthy enough of compassion that you're reaching for it. And so I think for people outside of the family, just being a mother support, especially like being the person who the mother can text so that you can say, you're a good mom. That sounds really annoying, so that you can give them the empathy that they need and maybe even come over and give them a break. Like, I just think that like giving moms a break in whatever way that means for that particular mom is like the job of everyone, because society needs to do it, but they're not. So we need to step in for each other.
Can I add to that? And I find this, I say it with gratitude for my co-host, because you need that person that you can send a text message to that will also, they're not going to judge you because they love you. So if you've shown yourself that grace and that self-acceptance and that to show that you're worthy of forgiveness in the moment or grace or understanding, sometimes also it's your spouse that pisses you off, and sometimes you also just need to, this thing happened, but you don't say anything at the risk of your friends or someone close to you judging your marriage or judging your spouse and treating your spouse differently. So I don't know if that, for me, it leans very heavily into what you're saying, that it's not going to be always my spouse that I turn to for that kind of grace. It's going to be a girlfriend. It's going to be a fellow mom. But I am in a very safe relationship with my co-host where I know she might get pissed off at my husband, but she's not going to hate him forever. And vice versa, by the same token. So when we get together again, the next time we see each other and we get our kids together, she's not going to be a dick to him because she understands that we're all just trying to keep our heads above water here. Does that make sense?
Right. Totally. I mean, I think creating a mom rage support network is about finding people who are not going to judge you, judge your children, judge your spouse. I mean, what good are they if they're going to judge you? Then they shouldn't be part of your network.
Exactly. So we have not touched on so much, but I think read the book because there's so much there. I mean, we haven't spoken about women who feel immense guilt for their mom rage because they struggled for years to conceive or they've adopted. And how dare they face rage? Or we haven't spoken about having special needs kids and the rage that comes with that. And that you feel like a terrible human being because your child needs extra love and support and you're not being that for them in that moment. Mom rage, Minna, deals with all of this and so much more. And I really want to thank you for penning it down, for putting in the work, for championing moms in this way. And can I ask... I know it's ugly to ask this of writers. It's not nice. But what would you consider working on next? I think mom rage is like an ongoing, discussion. But was there something else that you want to lean into?
Actually, that doesn't feel like a bad question.
Okay. Some writers feel pressured. Questions. Some writers feel so pressured, and I'm just like, I'm sorry if you're going through a creative process.
Oh, no, not at all. No, actually, before I started writing this book, I started writing a novel. And then this book became the book that needed to get written very quickly. And so I sort of dropped the novel and started writing this book. But I'm going back to the novel, and it is decidedly very sexy, which feels like the
Ooh.
antithesis of mom rage. And it's about queerness and relationships and a couple that opens up their marriage.
Oh, okay, nice. I like
Yeah,
it. I like it
it's going to be
already.
very different and very fun, I hope.
Oh, well, good luck with the process. And I look forward to that one as well. And we're gonna link all of our listeners and viewers up to Mom Rage and where you can access it here in South Africa. Again, thank you so much for the work you've put in, and thanks for joining us on TGE's Current Read.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I feel like I have a kindred spirit in South Africa.
You do, for sure, 100%.